If you ever sat in a 20 group and thought, why do we keep spending money on things we don't use? This episode's for you. Today on What the Prompt, I'm joined by Scott Falcone, a progressive operator who's behind the desk, across the showroom, and in the trenches. These days, he's focused on helping leaders embrace a culture-first approach to tech adoption. Because let's be honest, culture eats tech for breakfast. Welcome back to What the Prompt, where we turn buzzwords into real world dealership moves. If you're a GM, GSM, or a fixed op leader who's tired of being sold the next silver bullet, this one's for you. Scott and I spoke previously, and this conversation builds directly from that. So we're not starting from scratch. We're starting from real talk. Scott Falcone, welcome to the show. Why don't you kick us off and introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a bit about your journey in automotive and how you're helping your stores win today from the inside out.
Make it brief for you. I've been doing this right around 30 years, and I started selling cars in the business and saved my money. I've pushed my chips in on the table, my life savings 4 times to grow into the business. Currently, I have 2 stores. Also had a couple of Chevy stores along the way, in addition to my Hyundai Kia store now that we've exited. One was painful during the financial crisis when everybody was getting a letter. We got one too. That was an expensive day. And then another was just through a chosen exit. And so here we sit today with the 2 stores. Recently opened a 3.5 acre, 17,000 square foot used car lot. It's helped us expand our service department at our Kia store and really opened up some new avenues for us in a variety of areas. Bought into my first store after being in the business for about 6.5 years. Caught a few lucky breaks, and I did well and saved enough money to be able to buy 10% of a Chevy store in the ghetto, one of the ghettos in Chicago. That was a store that was unfortunately given back to General Motors in 2009 during the financial crisis. But from there, it's been a good ride. No complaints. The ups and the downs. It's a great business, and I'm fortunate to be part of it.
Man, that sounds like a lot of leadership building, iron sharpening iron moments for you. Definitely. Man, you just saying that, my whole mind was just thinking of how that would feel if I was in those shoes. Want to give a shout out to Todd Smith with Core AI. He connected me with you, and I asked him, I was like, Todd, I have this new brand. I'm building automotive intelligence. Definitely goes hand in hand with system of intelligence, with Core AI system. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, audience, please give Todd a call. It's an amazing system he has going on. But Scott, I asked him, I was like, who is one of your most progressive dealer friend partners who you could connect me with and who's successfully using his system? He definitely pointed your way. So thanks, Scott, for that. And when we were talking early in our discovery, you mentioned something big, that the leadership team stopped growing. Now, that's the part no one wants to admit. We keep promoting closers instead of leaders, and then wonder why we have turnover, toxicity, or zero succession planning. What did you see at your stores for that?
We are really in the midst of a regeneration of kind of who we are with the same team. I really believe in the team we've got. They're great people, but things evolve. Times change. We know that, simple enough to say it. And I think I've been blessed with boredom, quite honestly. I do need to stay excited about things, and the business changes a lot, so it's easy to be excited about this business. But as you transition through seasons of your life, seasons of the business, so on and so forth, it's easy to get caught up in day to day. And I think that we fell into that trap. I didn't, but that's not because I'm better or smarter. It's because I had the luxury of time on my side. So I leveraged my time and continued to try to sharpen a saw. It's because I enjoy doing it so much. So I'm doing something I like. It's not I'm not being forced to do these things. So growth to me is like breathing. I have to do it. I don't really have a choice. But what I've found as that evolves is that not everybody breathes growth, or they need growth like they need breath. So how do you translate that, or offer this paradigm to your team? Because without it, you're going sideways, and sideways isn't really sideways, because somebody else is getting better out there that we discussed, right? Somebody out there right now is smarter, faster than we are, and they're going to start taking, some of our lunch money, and we can't let that happen. So going sideways is like going backwards. So once we really had a heart to heart with the team, and they recognized that, we evaluated our constraints. And for us, the constraints were additional sales, additional BDC, and some real basic things, which was great. We weren't broken when it came to so many other areas in the dealership that can be broken, that are broken in so many stores. And that's just not us. So we made the commitment to a recruiting process. And I hate to say a training process, but more of an engagement process with the new employees. We abandoned a typical training agenda, if you will, with a full-time trainer or outside training materials and sources, and decided to offer a financial incentive, and also hopefully, we struck a pride chord with our handful of mentors who are our top salespeople. Because as we know, a lot of times we get a new guy, when we partner them up with a veteran, the veteran doesn't get much out of it. They may be a great trainer. They may be interested in doing it this week, next week, no. And that's not fair to those guys. And so what we decided to do was put a bonus plan together, where we are going to pay a mentor a $4,000 bonus after 60 days for training somebody that's new. And they need to sell 15 cars a month. And then we bonus them again. Excuse me, I said 60 days, 6 months. We're going to cut them loose somewhere between the 30-day and 45-day mark, depending on how they are. But at the end of 6 months, we pay them a $4,000 bonus. And as long as the new person averages 15 cars a month, through the end of the year, we're going to pay them another $4,000 bonus. So that's $8,000 for helping us train. We put a pencil to what a 15-car salesperson is worth at the average gross per car, additional dollars that come in, below the statement for the dealership. And, it was in excess of $600,000 plus dollars. And so the math became so simple that we needed to recommit to a full-time recruiter who was going to focus more on sales and BDC and less on cashiers and other administrative roles in the dealership, and then reward our mentors, and let them have some real skin in the game. It's a very prideful thing that's going on right now, and we're really in the beginning stages of it. So we've seen a few new people come on board, and we did the same thing for the BDC, not at that level financially, but in a similar fashion. So, they've got some people, that they can kind of turn to, the new people now. And our veterans, I think, really do feel like they have a bigger say in what's going on inside of the store. So we think that removes the constraint, and then that allows us to get back to scaling up like we should be. We have more than enough leads. We have beautiful facilities. We have dollars to advertise, systems, procedures. I mean, we really are fortunate that we've, got this thing to a pretty well-oiled machine over the years. And once we identified the constraints, it kind of became, what are we waiting for? Let's get this thing done, and let's get back to growing like we should.
Where did you find that philosophy? Is that just, are you a sports guy, or are you, training's everything to me. So, and man, I'm in agreement with that growth and breathing. I think about it, at the sales desk. I think about it at different stages of my life where I've been at different stores, and I'm with you, man. I'm with you. We're all aggressive sales professionals, but you're right. It's almost as if people hit a peak, and maybe they just need a mentor like you to see, like, no, there's more. But wait, there's more.
Well, somebody's got to do that, right, in the company, and that's kind of been me for sure. Some of the executive management staff, it's easier for them. They get as excited about it as I do, and some not. So, I guess the real trick is, I forget where I heard this. Maybe I invented it, so maybe I'll take credit for it today. Was, we've all heard bringing a horse to water, right? But you can't make him drink. But the real trick is to find out what makes the horse thirsty. And the horse will drink, whenever it's ready. So that's not going to be the same for everybody. So when you're talking about dealerships that employ 75 and 100 people, you've got a lot of different horses with a lot of different, thirst needs, right? And so, that is the job of the leader, whoever that may be, whether it's, the owner, the general managers, the general sales managers, the sales managers. I mean, anybody can, wear the cape on any given day, right? Your business card doesn't define leadership, right? That's just a label identifying your name and a phone number and an email address. Might have a title on there, but nothing could be further from the truth in some instances, right? So the size of your business card doesn't dictate the quality of your leadership. So anybody can, take the lead on this and find out what, make these other horses thirsty.
I want to bridge this to our audience. If you're a GSM, a sales manager, or a service advisor listening, what's the first sign you're in a broken system?
I think that ignorance at the top to evident problems would be my first sign if I was in one of those roles and I had things that were broken and I shared that they were broken and I had a game plan to fix them. Not a complicated one either, not an expensive one. Just we do things wrong here and we need to change them. And if it fell on deaf ears, then I think you got to go.
Let's ask the $1 million question. Can you fix it without blowing everything up?
Yeah, I think that it's stores are like snowflakes and fingerprints. No two are the same. We've got too many different things going on. I mean, somebody sells Chevys and Fords, same brand, and the stores couldn't be more different across the country. The types of customers, the types of leadership that they have in the store, their sales philosophies, everything. So I think that some places can get so broken that they do need to get blown up. And over time, when we've hit rough patches, those are questions that I ask. And I've been fortunate enough that I've never even really had to get anywhere close to that because we do have such an amazing team. We wouldn't have any of the success. I wouldn't have any of the success that I have if it wasn't for the amazing team around us. That's for sure. So I think that it certainly might be the case in some places. If you've got a veteran crew of bad actors who've been running a place for a long time, you may have to take 3 or 4 steps back before you can even take one forward.
Definitely agreeable on that, and I've worked in a few of those places myself in my career. I will say. Now, this is what the prompt. We can't go too long without talking AI. Let's talk system integration. Most dealers have CRMs that don't talk to their DMS, marketing tools that don't talk to fixed ops. Why do you think this still exists?
What's in it for me is what a vendor is going to ask, right? And if there's no demand for change, push for change, or if dealers are not exiting products because of lack of innovation, then there's no motivation to change. And so I think that that's been our industry since I've been in it, quite honestly. It's not innovative at all on a large scale. That's not to say that there's not innovators in the industry. That's not to say that there's not innovative companies, ideas, and wonderful thinking that's going on. But, whether they don't have the ability to scale, whether they don't have the finances to get off the ground, a number of reasons. But you do have some very large players, in things like CRMs and DMSs, and there's just no reason for them to get better, quite honestly. So we're going to be stuck with what we've got for quite some time. You mentioned Todd's company, Core, and I don't know if he would agree with my assessment or my description, but for me, he's integrating for sure, and there'll be other systems in the world that'll be different from his that will integrate and do things. But, we've missed out on bolt-on opportunities for years because our vendors aren't interested in allowing somebody who may take a CRM, a component of a CRM that's lacking, and allow a bolt-on product to help it be better for us. So unless it's their product, we're not going to see those evolutions. So I've always been, disappointed with our vendors as far as how they grow. Quite honestly, there's just no motivation when you've got 3 and 4 and 5,000 dealers on board, right?
Definitely. And I'm in agreement with you. I not sure if I shared with you before I got into auto retail, I worked with open source technology. I was in strategic partnerships and alliances with Red Hat Linux. So I understand the open source space pretty good. And so when I got into auto retail, I was very surprised that systems weren't talking, systems weren't friendly, actually. That was the whole push with open source. I mean, you can see that from Google versus, an Apple type of ecosystem, Apple being closed, the Android system being open and such like that. But let's help our listeners out. If you're a GM evaluating an AI product, what questions should you be asking a vendor, Scott? What do you personally look for?
We have really been leaning on our GMs to expand their horizons, with AI, and they have embraced it. To their credit, it took a little doing. Again, we had to find out what made them thirsty, and once they saw the value on small scale levels, right, writing a better email, a better text, writing a better write-up report, things of that nature, that became more professional. Once they saw how much it helped them, it was easier for them to become more fluent. And then they realized how critical it is to become a good prompter, and so they're doing a really good job with it, and they're being more and more creative with it now. So I think that the questions that they're going to ask versus somebody else is going to ask versus somebody else is going to ask is going to be in a lot of different directions. If you're part of a big group of stores, your first questions may be all about security, and it may be about that. And in a smaller group like ours, I can tell you that they're not going to be asking about security. Now, that's not necessarily good, but they're going to be asking about how is this going to help me in my day-to-day, productivity levels, and how am I going to sell more cars, and how am I going to do this and do that? And that's fine. And I think that's a fine approach to take as a GM, because that's what you're after, right? I mean, the security part, you kind of expect it to come with that. And maybe you leave that to somebody, with a different business card. I don't expect GMs and GSMs all over the country to have similar skill sets. Sometimes, we're more, they're more of an administrative position. Some are more customer facing, right? So I think they're all going to ask different types of questions. Hopefully they circle back and they get the full circle of all the questions that need to be asked when it comes to an AI tool. But before they even can ask a question, how do you ask a question about a physics product if you don't know basic addition and subtraction and multiplication and division, right? So, a lot of these people are going to be asking all the wrong questions, quite honestly, until they become fluent in AI. So before you wind up your GM and you send him or her off on a mission to find you some new products, the next shiny object. I think they ought to get into the weeds first on AI.
Got it. Do you benchmark prior to going, let's say shopping? Like, do you go through your own systems, or do you have your GMs go through their systems and maybe look at where their processes are currently to move forward?
We have not taken an approach that we're looking for an off-the-shelf vendor-led AI product to change our stars. I don't know what's out there that's going to do that. Again, mentioning Todd's product, it's evolving. It's getting better all the time. We're constantly offering challenges. One of our recent challenges is for that product to reduce the multi-hour, month after month commission Easter egg hunt that our controllers go on every month, just for management, not even for sales. But it's a long process. There's different components. I would say we probably have a complex pay plan, not complicated, but there are iterations that you have to go through and check this and check that, and if this and then this. So that takes a long time. And so right now, his product is working with our controllers to bounce from a CRM to a DMS to another third-party tool that we have to pull all this together. And we think that when the jet lands, it will be a 5-minute process now, 10 at the most. So, we're not looking for an AI product is what it is. We've actually spent time working on building our own products in-house with just an off-the-shelf, pro model of, GPT or Gemini's. We'll spend all the money for sure on everything to find out, so we're spending, as much as you can with Manus and with GPT and with Gemini and so on. And, we've got a full-time videographer who is now, starting to live inside of Runway and some other things. So we do have some products, Runway being one that we're looking into that will help us, but, a little bit outside the box as compared to fielding phone calls, for the service advisors and things like that. I'm okay waiting a little bit on the sidelines for that. So we're using AI more for solving a very specific problem or becoming more productive on a very specific area that we want to work on. So, in closing deals, as an example, we've built multiple tools for situations, comparing an old loan at an interest rate to a new loan at an interest rate, and which sounds pretty primitive, but we've also thrown in a variety of other spins on tools like that help close deals. We have a budget analysis tool that we've built that took quite some time, where we will actually, we have a payment resistance and we're quite far apart. And a lot of people, when they say, I can't afford that, often they're really saying that I just don't know I'm going to find this extra $200 a month in my budget because I really love the car and want to get it. So we take them through a budget analysis tool that goes through things like, how many Starbucks do you drink a week, right? And if you just we're able to forego one of those, we just found you $17 a month. And then there's this, and then there's this, and the next thing you know, we're showing them the savings, right? It's the old reduction to the ridiculous close is what it really amounts to, but it's delivered in a professional manner. So AI has built tools like that for us. We built a technician efficiency tool for flat rate versus an hourly rate. So when an hourly rate guy is considering wanting to go flat rate, and our management staff is considering that, we plug in where they are now with booked hours, unapplied labor, show them that, here's a 30% raise against a 30% increase in productivity. The store wins, you win, things like that. So we've not really been out knocking on vendor doors for AI tools. We've been actually busy building them.
Sounds like you're feeding a lot of training data to some LLMs, different ones. I have Manus. I use Claude for most of my script writing and posts and things like that, and ChatGPT for creating actually just deep thinking more. What is y'all's go-to LLM, I guess, with training data?
I would say right now I lean into ChatGPT. Manus is a real complex, robust platform, and the more I tinker with that, the more I see what direction it travels. And when I'm working on code, that's been evolving. I mean, it's funny. We can look back on this in 2 months, and everything that we say will be antiquated, right? We'll say we'll use 4 for this, use 4.5 for that, go to O1 reasoning for this, O3 mini for that, and it'll all be garbage. So this is definitely a snapshot in time that we're talking about. But I do like some of the mini models that move quite quickly, and they're fine. And I feel like everything has been coding better. I remember there was a day when I was working in GPT-4 on that budget analysis tool, and it really got hung up and stuck at a point that was disappointing for me, because I had a whole new section we were building out that was going to include what you would do with all this excess money for savings invested in the stock market, and it was really a cool spin. And I just couldn't get the thing to move forward anymore. And I got an email that said that, '01 was out. And, so I immediately, moved from a $20 a month subscription to $200 a month.
Yeah.
And 30 minutes later, I had my tool bill. So,
Boom.
That day, that taught me that day, don't waste time saving money. Not there. This is not wasting money. This is investing, right? So advice there would be write the checks for all the best of the best, figure them out, and start winnowing them back as you find some of your favorites.
Man, I definitely appreciate that. You had when we were speaking, you had a line I'll never forget. You said, we tried to fix culture with comp plans. That hit me. Can you give me an idea of how pay plans and real leadership, how that actually changes a store's performance?
I mean, I think that we all know that negatively impacted pay plans for missing targets, if you're of value and you value your store and you value your title as a leader, and fill in the blank, right? Sales manager, finance manager, whatever that may be. I think that, the pay plan we're keeping score. And I don't know that a pay plan will ever fix or create culture other than in the wrong direction, quite honestly, right? A bad pay plan that's overpaying bad actors will create a very bad culture. I think we've seen that in good times, right? In real good times, when things are just too easy and people are making, too much money for the work that they put in. I'm all for paying as much money as a pay plan allows. I've never cut anybody back on a pay plan, never will. I want them to get rich, because if they are, I know then we're all doing, really well. Money flows downhill as far as I'm concerned. But if you have a good culture, comp plans, I can identify, again, back to, having some pride in what you're doing. So if you have comp plans that target important areas for the dealership, it may be gross for your store, maybe volume for another store. It probably ought to be both, right? Not at the expense of the other one. There's so many areas of a dealership, that we tick off. Our pay plans include things for front-end management staff like warranty penetration, which is typically going to be a finance-only driven pay plan. We are all of my people are paid out of the same big pot. So the culture and the pain and the pleasure of the pay plans are shared. And so because I believe that we do have a great culture and it's because of the team and who they are, that those pay plans just magnify a good culture. Similarly to a bad pay plan magnifying a very bad culture where you've got bad actors being overpaid, and then they start, doing things they shouldn't be doing.
All right, let's zoom out. You've got a 30 rooftop group asking for your playbook. What's the first 3 things you do?
Well, I guess I'd probably ask a lot of questions, because my playbook, may not work for that group whatsoever. So I may be of no value whatsoever. So, you mentioned 20 group participation and things like that, which I love so much because of the various sizes of the groups and the people and the dealers and the flavors in the room. And, you look at financial comps and you see success and you see some failures. And it's just many roads to Mecca, as they say. And here's a bunch of Kia dealers and nobody does anything the same way, and a bunch of Hyundai and Ford and Chevy dealers and nobody's doing it right. And we find out from one another, well, where could we add to the good? So assuming that 30 rooftop organization, had a lot of good going, I'd actually build on the good, right? I play to the strengths more than chase weaknesses. But at some point, if your weaknesses are what's constraining you, then we have to identify those. So I guess I'd want to hear first, why they're succeeding and how do we add to that without adding expenses.
All right. If you're still with us, it means this message hit home. And if you're the kind of leader who wants to be part of the next conversation, not just hear about it, do us a favor, subscribe on YouTube, drop a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you're a vendor, dealer, or tech builder who's got real value, hit us up. All right, car people. Today's prompt is this. What would your store look like if culture drove your tech stack, not the other way around? I want to give thanks to Scott for joining us today. Scott, thank you. Thanks for being part of this podcast. And we couldn't be more grateful for these words of wisdom you gave us.
It's nice to
That's
be here.
it for
Thank
now.
you for having me.
Thanks, Scott.